Welcome to Synced on Air. I'm your host, Angelique Robb, and today Christina Menapace, our new editor-in-chief, is joining us so that we can meet with Kona Gray, one of our favorite people to talk to in this industry. Thank you, Kona, for joining us.
Absolutely. So happy to be here.
So Kona, for those of you who don't know, is the principal of principal of EDSA, sorry, too many acronyms, and the president of ASLA, and he's also been a frequent speaker at our Sync Live events. So thank you so much, Kona. And Christine has prepared a lot of great questions to start this off. So Christine, can I hand things over to you?
Sure, absolutely. Good morning. Well, I figure the beginning is always a good place to start. And I was kind of wondering, Kona, like where you grew up, what your childhood was like, and doing a little research, I found out you were actually from Liberia. And then I was even more intrigued. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up?
Of course. I always start with the beginning. And I feel very lucky to have had the experience of growing up in Liberia. I was actually born in the States. My parents immigrated to the U.S. in the 1960s for university. And both my sister and I were born in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then when my parents wrapped up their education, we actually went to Seattle from Boston for their graduate studies. And we all packed up and moved our way back to Liberia. And that was an amazing experience. So from the early 70s to around 1980 is the time, I spent in Africa growing up. Some of the most impactful years of my life, really, in terms of aligning me with what I do now, what I love, being in the environment and designing for people.
Obviously, with the moves in your early childhood, your parents, it sounds like they're highly educated. And I know in reading, your dad was an architect. And I saw that you kind of started off your education with fine art and then moved into architecture and then eventually landed on, landscape architecture. How did that kind of come to be? And what was it that clicked with landscape architecture?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't a straight shot for me. And I think that is true of many people. You sort of find your passion as life evolves and unfolds. And my dad is actually 85 years old, architect, still practicing in Liberia.
Wow.
He is fascinating. He is definitely someone I admire tremendously for his grit and tenacity. One of the sort of big, I would say, inspirations for me in the world of art and creative is Sidney Poitier. And Sidney Poitier and my father have a lot in common. They really remind me of each other. And just that sort of drive, that nothing will stop me kind of drive, but with the care for doing it the right way. And so he did not encourage me to be an architect. Okay. So a lot of people probably are like, you sure your dad didn't want you to do what he does? And I was like, no, he didn't encourage me to be an architect. He encouraged me to really focus on what makes me happy and what I love, and to, certainly always do the right thing. I grew up in kind of a strong religious family that was had a lot of focus on the golden rule and just being a good person. And so I started drawing at an early age because my dad would bring home his work and I would see him, designing at the house. It's an architecture thing. Architects just don't know when to stop designing. And so on our kitchen table or on his drafting table at the house, he would be drawing. And when I was young, when he was drawing, I would be drawing. And I would be showing him my drawings, to get his input. And so it was really kind of a great relationship of design from the get-go. So after high school, during high school, I had the most amazing art teacher that encouraged me to continue my art. I entered into many, competitions and won awards and all that stuff. And I actually went to it was a program called Governor's Honors, and because we were in the Atlanta area, and it was something that the the governor of Georgia pulled together students from all over the state to go, and these were students that excelled in whatever they loved. And we spent like a summer camp working on our passions. But what was cool about that is you got to meet a lot of other people. So fine art was the base. I ended up continuing on to SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, to study fine art and painting. I kept hanging out with architects. All my friends were architects. And
felt very like
something's
home.
something's going on here. And what was interesting about that is that I was like, well, I really am intrigued about this profession. And I love painting. I knew I will always paint. I always will draw. So I decided to change majors, and I changed it to architecture. My dad didn't say a word. Just kept going, and I really enjoyed it. But I knew that there was more, and so my mom got ill, and I actually spent some time back in the Atlanta area, and then on to Boston to continue my studies in architecture. And that was rigorous. I was at the Boston Architectural College, and if you're familiar with the program, the school, it's a co-op. Essentially, you are required to work during the day to attain practical hours. And then all your design classes, all your studios are in the evenings. So it's very, very rigorous, really rigorous. And so my time there was amazing. I learned from some of the best instructors. Many of them were teaching at Harvard or MIT. There was such a great connection in the architecture community to the Boston Architectural College. It's just a long history. But
that's a great mix, though. I really like that layout. Yeah, the practical experience and the schooling together, and probably making a lot of industry connections. That I really like that.
More like an apprenticeship.
It's exactly that. That's the model. It's based on the French atelier process. And so when you're an apprentice in sort of the French school Beaux-Arts training, you copy the masters, basically. That's how you learn. You train under someone else that's been, doing it for decades. And it was fascinating. So we were placed in different companies based on the organizations that were available. I actually worked for a structural engineer when I was in college. Yeah. Great experience, because I had learned what not to do. They're like, you architects are so good.
Well,
you're doing stuff that doesn't work. So I passed them.
Well, but that
great.
Probably led you, when you and I have talked before about how important it is to translate design to construction, you were getting a taste of that from the structural engineers. And that, again, that's another discipline that we have to understand each other and work better together.
Yeah. Of course. And the other crazy thing about the experience was in my studio courses, there was such a focus on the object of a building, of the architecture. And I get it. And this is what they're training you to do, is to understand how to design objects. And I just, I was like, okay, I can do that. And so I drew the facades of a building and, a perspective or whatever, so you can, to help people visualize that actual piece. And it's very subjective when you think about it. But I kept adding stuff to my rendering. I kept adding food, kept adding people. I kept adding cars. And my professor, I remember this vividly. This one professor was like, I want to see your architecture. It's like this thing that's so precious.
That's not real.
And I was like, it's not real. It doesn't exist that way. So I'm sure I frustrated the you-know-what out of him, but it was like, nah. And that was a little light bulb that popped, and I was like, wait, there's something else out there. And so eventually, because it was going to take me so long to finish as a BAC, I ended up working my way back to Georgia. I spent a minute at SCAD trying to transfer all of my architecture credits there, and they were not very receptive because I think they wanted the money. They wanted me to start over again. So I was like, yeah, this is not going to happen. So I took a moment to reassess the situation. And it's like, okay, I'll go to Georgia Tech. And that's a good program because I was like, I got to go back full time and just finish. And Georgia Tech's, their courses didn't align in terms of the timing. So the schedule didn't align. So I couldn't get in the time I wanted to. And I was with a friend at Georgia just hanging out. And she's like, well, Georgia has a program called landscape architecture. Maybe you would consider that. I was like, what is that? No idea.
I hadn't even heard of it.
No idea about landscape architecture. So I called my dad and he was like, oh yeah. When I was in the States, I ran into some landscape architects. They're amazing. Here's a few people to call because, the networks are tight. And then I went down to the program and I sat down with the chair at that time with my resume, my transcripts, and their curriculum. And he looked at me and he's like, all right. And so he started checking boxes. He started checking off courses. And he was like, I'll have you in and out of here in a year and a half. I was like, sold. Get it. And I still to this day, I'm so grateful that, things happen for a reason, little by little, and, I give a lot of credit to my friend.
I was going to say, it's so funny how life decisions can pivot on something like that. The fact that the architecture program didn't start when you wanted it to,
Well, and also that you listened. You have to be listening to find your way too, I think is important.
Exactly.
And it sounds like every part of the way you were listening. So that helped you get where you needed to get to.
Yeah, and I think that's luckily my parents were very good about sharing ways to evolve in life without getting frustrated and also without, trying to, shove a square peg into a round hole, and so over those early years, I learned how to essentially go with the universe, ride the waves, don't fight the waves, just, let it take you where life is intending you to go.
There's that, Beatles quote, life happens while you're busy making other plans.
Yeah. You think you're in control.
Right. You're not. That's one of my father's favorite quotes, that's for sure. But I mean, what insight for your parents as well, because so many parents are like, you've been in school how long? How much are we spending here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and many parents from West Africa, or most folks that immigrate, their parents are very strict. They want them to succeed. I know the Chinese are notorious for it. The Nigerians in West Africa are notorious. I mean, you got to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, and that's it. you get the business.
Yeah.
And I know in many cultures here in the States and around the world, they were very similar. They want you to be successful, but sometimes they are really a bit overbearing, and that's tough for people, I think.
Right. Yeah. It's tough. It's because on the one hand, they see the opportunities and think, you'd be silly not to go for them. But yeah, as the child, I'm sure it's a bit intimidating.
Well, and there's so many variations on the theme. Landscape architecture is a great career. Why not? Did you say doctor, lawyer, engineer, and landscape architect? Or there's lots of, and there'll be other careers that we don't know of that are really great careers, so.
I do feel like landscape architecture tends to fly under the radar, like still to this day. It's not something that I think a lot of young people realize is a career and a very viable career.
Yeah, Angelique and I have talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
I know that in reading, it said you have experience in 30 plus countries. And I was just like, wow, that is quite amazing. And so in terms of landscape architecture and all the countries you've worked in, I mean, is there a particular culture or country that you feel is really pushing the boundaries for the industry?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, I'm fortunate to be a part of a global design company, and we work. I mean, sometimes I pinch myself because I'm on a plane going somewhere to design with clients and communities in far places, and sometimes it's in our back door. It cracks me up because some of our local clients, especially, in the state of Florida, maybe in Gainesville or, in the Panhandle of Florida, like, oh my God, you guys are so far away. And I'm like, dude, this is a local trip. I like 15 plus hours to go someplace. This is really easy. But I've been really mesmerized by our planet and how wonderful it is. And I mean, all over the world, just all these unique landscapes. And we've worked in pretty much every part of it. And, there are two places that I personally have not been to, but I've researched and studied that I'm intrigued with. And, those two places are in Asia, so Southeast Asia and sort of the Northeast portion. So Japan and Singapore are two places that I really admire. And I know folks that have traveled there, and we've had conversations. One of my colleagues is a landscape architect, and his wife is a photographer. And they've taken trips to Japan, and she's, cataloged everything from, the temples to the different landscapes, the trees, the gardens, and that. I'm just like, all right, those are the two bucket lists. And so, yes, I've actually traveled to 60 plus countries, but I haven't been to those two, and I really, really want to go. I recently found a lot of interest and intrigue in Singapore. One of my good colleagues is a garden designer, and we actually judged together at the Philadelphia Flower Show, and that's how we got to know each other well. And there's a major garden show in Singapore that he's been like showing me pictures of, and he's like, you gotta go. The landscape is amazing. They really care about landscape, and I just haven't been able to put the trip together yet. It's just the time, and I'm like, all right, it's gonna happen. But the reason why is in Singapore, there's such a major landscape it's on a higher tier. I mean, there's such a major emphasis on the functionality of the landscape from the standpoint of what it does to support. It's a very small diamond-shaped island, and they have limited land, and having that landscape, having those areas of land available for the environment to do what it needs to do, keeps them safe. It makes their lives better. People are happy. There's not a lot of traffic. There's not a lot of smog. It's just beautiful from what I've researched. And that's a major factor why I'm inspired by that place. But the Japanese for centuries have revered the landscape. 80% of the country is covered by forest. It just shows you their sort of attention to this care and understanding and respect for the environment. And that just, it aligns with my spirit. I mean, that's one thing that's really amazing.
Is it just sort of ingrained in their culture? I mean,
It
because
is.
I feel like in the United States, it's almost an
age.
effort to get people to recognize the value of the environment.
I know. I don't get it. So the indigenous people of this country, all of us are immigrants, right? But the indigenous people, the native tribes, Padawan, you go through it, Seminole, there's so many. They understood it. If you go and do a little bit of research on, their care for the land, you'll see that it was ingrained in their cultures, multiple cultures. They only utilized what they needed, right? If they needed sustenance for a season, they would kill one buffalo, not the entire herd. And they would use the entire buffalo from the skins, the fur, the meats, everything would get used, the bones, everything would get used. And they prayed, they gave thanks for this gift that God had given them. And I don't know, through our industrial revolution and now our technological revolution, we've gotten so far away from that. What we really need is an environmental revolution. This, I believe, would reset the world, but most importantly, reset the U.S. and this country, because we have this wealth of land. There's so much land here that it's so misunderstood and underappreciated, and it's sad. And so that's why when I look at those tiny countries that have just a little bit of land, and they get it, they care for it because they don't have a lot.
Yeah.
but they treat it
We
like
have
it's a
limited
lot. For
resources. They're
them,
precious.
very precious. They treat it like it's very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't realize the stat about 80% of Japan is covered in forest because they're known for forest bathing. I can't remember the
Yes.
Japanese term for it. You might know it, but
Yeah.
and how even the smell of the forest reduces your stress levels. And
Absolutely.
yeah, just a great tie into, understanding people and their responses
It
and why we
is.
need forests.
Nature
Sorry,
does so
Christine.
much, and yeah, it's
Yeah, I'm a big hiker, and that's where I find my peace. But
mm-hmm.
I'm not an aggressive hiker. In fact, one person even called me a dawdler. And I thought,
That's okay.
I'm an inadvertent forest bather.
Inadvertent forest bather. A slowly moving forest bather.
Because I'm a slow hiker. I like to
You gotta
take it
take your
all in,
time.
notice the nature.
I think
Yeah,
that
it's
is good.
cliche,
You're
but
enjoying it.
yeah, you can smell the roses, right? It's very cliche, but it's so true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I just wrote an essay on in defense of dawdling. So,
Love that.
But to follow up on, the cultures and countries you admire as far as their attitude towards the environment and landscape architecture, as far as your own projects, and obviously I'm sure there's been a many and you've learned something from each one, but is there one or two that kind of stand out to you for a particular reason?
Yeah, there's one that was earlier in my career, and it was a project that landed in our design studio. My mentor and our partner in charge at the time, Joe Lally, really worked closely on this project, and another colleague, Hitesh Mehta, who is amazing. You have to meet Hitesh. We were just so fortunate to work on this eco destination in China. It's located in the bamboo forest. The project is called Crosswaters. It's an award-winning project. But when the stars align and you have that client that just gets it,
yeah,
we experienced that. And we actually had a feng shui master on our project on this development because we wanted to make sure it was spiritually centered. It was so cool. So I'm in this design studio. Hitesh is working on it. My colleague Matt Lewis is working on it. Joe, myself, everybody's just really, pulling it together. It was just an amazing effort, and I've always been intrigued by those types of projects that not only solve a business, um, uh, approach for a client, but sort of solve and give back to the community. So the Crosswaters is open to the public. It's a botanical garden. And the reason it's called Crosswaters is when you arrive, you lose your car and you cross a bamboo bridge and you arrive on this it's basically a spiritual retreat. And there's limited units. They're all tucked in the bamboo forest. You can't tell where the architecture stops and the landscape begins, and vice versa. It's all interwoven together. It's definitely one of my favorites. It's fantastic. And people always ask me about other projects that have inspired me. And the other one that inspires me was basically a making the difference kind of project we did here in North Miami. And it was a site that was abandoned and just, there was trash and, refrigerators and cars and everything just in this community. And this was an underserved community. And this particular site, this property, believe it or not, for 50 years had been in the ownership of Miami-Dade County Parks. So it's supposed to be a park.
And it became like a junkyard.
Yeah, it was a junkyard. They never developed it. They just had it in their surplus and it just sat there. And so, the stars aligned again, and through a really close friend, a contractor by the name of Tom Miller, and one of our local television stations called Local 10, we came together and donated our services to transform this piece of property into an outdoor living room for the community.
Oh, that's awesome. I'd love to see
Those
photos of both of these projects. I
Yeah,
think it would
we'll
be
get them
really
to you.
cool. Awesome. Awesome.
What
We'll
did
get
the
them to
space
you.
in Miami incorporate? Was it gardens or like playground, a
Yeah,
combo of both?
yeah. So we actually went through a very intriguing process, but a process that is rooted in landscape architecture, where we worked with the community to bring their visions, their ideas to life. And it took a lot of trust building because they were very skeptical because no one had paid attention to them for decades. This was just, they were just discarded. And through the process of design, we got to know them. Listened to the community. We took their input. They were like, you don't want to know what we want, do you? I mean, you're going to pull some playground out of your catalog and drop it here. We're like, no, that's not how we do it. And once we got to that point of trust and care for each other, the process moved very, very smoothly. And it was really fantastic. I always tell the story. There was a young girl that was part of the workshop, design workshop. And when I looked at her, I was like, well, what would you like to see? And she's like, I really want an orange slide. I was like, orange slide? Orange? And she's like,
Very specific.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
it's got to be orange. I was like, okay. I was like, well, can I ask why? Why orange? And she's like, well, the Miami Dolphins are one of my favorite sports teams, and they have orange one of their colors, and I love orange. And so she got her orange slide.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
really awesome. Was the
Making
community
yeah,
dreams
we made
involved
happen.
in the physical labor? Like, did they do any of the construction or?
Well, they didn't. I mean, they were there to support, but we had a lot of professionals that showed up, and it was, and they all donated their time. Everything was donated, the materials, everything was donated. And I mean, our time was pro bono. I called upon colleagues that were like, "Oh yeah, we'll do this," and everybody rolled up their sleeves and pulled it together. But we had a great, contractor or Miller. They got it built. Yeah, it was. Miller Construction did a great job. I was really impressed. And cutting that ribbon and seeing the entire community come together was, I mean, I had tears of joy, because it was multi-generational. And the
That's
way we designed it was
success.
a success. It was designed inspired by a flower. And so one portion of the site was dedicated to the roots, right? These are the kids. And this is where we had areas for children to experience nature play and as well as formal play. And then the next section of the site was dedicated to essentially the STEM, and that signified the parents. And so there was a great opportunity for parents to really get entwined and interwoven into the land with their kids and with their parents. And so it's very multi-generational.
Hmm.
And it was fantastic. So we in that area we had a lot of walking areas. We had fitness equipment, something for everybody to do together. And then the last section of the park, the design, was dedicated to flowers. And this was really pushed towards the elders. And this is where we had very contemplative seating areas, and this is where the wisdom was disseminated. It was really such a great experience to draw this out together.
Hmm.
That's why I love doing what I do. It's not an effort of work. It's a passion. It's what we do.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. What a great thing to experience and carry through your life.
Yeah, it was magical. And Local 10, the TV station, they documented the entire process. There's several videos online of the process. It was really amazing.
Uh, Obviously, this was a project of great cultural significance. And I know that when you and I had a few minutes to chat at Synced Live, I said, well, what are you working on now? What are you excited about? And you had mentioned the Juneteenth Museum.
Yes.
And obviously, that's still in its development stages, but
Mhm.
and I should probably mention it's in Fort Worth, Texas.
Yep.
What can you share about that project?
This project again, I pinch myself because in life you don't always see these things. And when it happens, it's like, oh my goodness, this is something we really want to do. And so our involvement began when we received an invitation from an architect we know. It's a company called Big out of New York, Bjork Ingles Group, and they were looking for a landscape architect with sensibility that was interested in and going on a journey. And for anyone that is aware of museum projects or any sort of institutional projects where they have to raise money, they take time. And so the patriarch of this project is a woman by the name of Opal Lee. And she is the one that is responsible for bringing the movement together to establish Juneteenth as a holiday. And she actually walked to DC with her team of supporters. And, this is the moment where Joe Biden signed into law Juneteenth as a holiday, which is really, unbelievable
Monumental.
considering the history.
Yeah.
It's very monumental. And so we began in the concept stage, and we were working through the ideas, and the inspiration was drawn through the Juneteenth star. And look it up. It's a lot of meaning. And so we took the Juneteenth star and paired it with the landscape. And one major element of the landscape in Texas is the blue bonnet flower. It's actually the state flower. And so we wove those two together, and we were actually working off an inspiration from the architects that took the Juneteenth star and wove it together with the traditional shotgun shack, the shotgun house architecture vernacular. And that was the inspiration that really drove the project, was this, rooting the star with the place, and identifying that expression through everything. So throughout the design, it's really woven through. So the land, we saved the existing trees that are on site. We worked very closely with the land, with the topography and how it works. Yeah, because we wanted instant landscape, and trees are very significant. They have a lot of meaning in terms of life. And so we really tied all that together. One of the big ideas that we brought forward were a series of gardens around the building. My favorite gardens in Plaza is the Promised Land Plaza. It's like the main place where everyone gathers, and it has a lot of significance in African American culture. So it was really, really fantastic. So we've gone through concept refinement. We've gone through schematic design, which is the next design stage after concept, and we're about to enter into design development. And all along, our client is raising money. It takes time to make these things happen. And we're just very thankful that we have this opportunity to collaborate and be a part of such a transformative project. It's really cool.
Is there a estimated start date for the project to be constructed? Is it hard to say because of the fundraising, maybe?
Yeah, it's a hard question. We had a similar experience with the Norton Museum here in West Palm Beach, Florida. It took them 10 years from idea to, and they had to raise money. There was kind of a silent phase where they were reaching out to friends, and I'm pretty sure that's kind of where Juneteenth is right now. So, they're organizing that, and then you get to what is called a public phase of fundraising, and that's when you're probably at about 75% to your goal, 70 to 85%, and that's when you go to the public and you open it up, and usually it takes you above your goal. And that's sort of the process. But yeah, it takes time. Maybe there's a major benefactor out there that would be inspired to just make it happen. We'd love that.
Well, I was going to say, if we could get some details on who to reach out to, we'd love to put it in the show notes for the podcast. And we'd love to put it, we are going to be writing this up as an article as well. And so again, putting that in the article, I'd love to include that. So please, let's follow up and make sure that that's part of the article.
We'll share that. I mean, the biggest sort of inspiration, Opal, I mean, she's in her hundreds. So
I've read about her. Yes.
It's amazing. I
Amazing.
haven't met her in person, but I'm like everything I've read about her, every interview I've watched. She's wow, yeah,
How
amazing.
old was she when she made the trip cross country?
Oh, I think this was maybe 4 years ago.
Oh,
Yeah, I
wow.
don't know I don't remember the exact date, but I think it was 4 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty
Well, I
pretty
know
inspe-
we're starting to get absolutely. As we're talking about Juneteenth and, minorities and all of that, obviously, in today's political climate, there's a lot of the DEI initiatives are taking a lot of fire. And I was
Mhm.
wondering if I know that you have been such a huge advocate for wanting to attract more minorities to landscape architecture. Do you have any comments about sort of, the current state of affairs and, what
Yeah,
it means to, you know, the future?
sure. I definitely do. I think it we shouldn't take anything for granted in life. I think that's first and foremost. I mean, we are all fortunate to be here, and I think what's important is that we consider the contributions that anyone can make. Right, and we're all God's
Mhm.
children. Everyone has something to contribute, no matter what your situation is. And when you look at DEI and the reasons why this has become such a lexicon in our culture, is that it is one of the first times where people have acknowledged the importance of everyone, not just one group, not another, everyone. And the
Yeah.
intent, from my perspective, that's why it has bubbled up. I tell people the genie's out of the bottle. You can't stuff it back in. And we have a lot of wishes that we will receive, because people deserve it. People deserve to be treated fairly. That's what equity means. It's so
Yep.
simple. I don't know why it's been twisted. I know there's a lot of, concern that, I'm not going to, advance because you're doing this or you're doing that. But there's abundance for everyone if you just take a moment and step into it. And so, for me personally, I've never wanted to be treated differently because of who I am, my skin color, the color of my eyes, my dreads. I've never wanted to be treated differently. I've always wanted to be considered a human. That's what we all have. That levels the playing field. We're all humans. And so when we
And therefore should
consider
be
that,
equal. Yeah.
yeah, we all should
Right.
be equal. I mean, there's a flag I have in my house that says, humankind, be both. It's that simple.
Right. Exactly.
Be
Yeah.
human and be kind. It's not that hard.
I
I
love
mean,
that.
and
I
this,
love that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it goes back to the golden rule. That's what I was taught growing up. It's like, I don't judge anyone. Everyone is, one of God's kids. And I love that. So it's just, I find beauty in everything.
As president of ASLA, do you feel like you're in a position? I mean, what do you see as the organization's role in this current political climate? Because, of course, it's, not only are the DEI initiatives under fire, but also environmentally, you're
Hmm.
seeing the rollback of so many different protections. And, for a while, I know, especially with government projects, there was a mandate to, include a certain amount of
Right.
sustainable elements and things like that. How do you see that becoming a reality in terms of what the industry will be working with in the next few years?
Yeah, it's a crazy time, but it's not new. I hope people know that this stuff has been going on. It's happened in years past, in the '60s and early '70s. There was essentially a major movement towards the environment because it benefited people. That's what we all need to understand. And if you just step back for a minute and think about it, and you understand what we all need, it gets really easy. So our mission is very solid at ASLA. I mean, it's focused on designing a sustainable and equitable world through landscape architecture. Full stop. Very, very simple. And we put a lot of emphasis on doing the right thing as well. And that's what I love. I love to know that people care and people want to do the best they can through landscape architecture. And we have amazing members and non members and landscape architects and landscape architecture professionals and friends around the community that all are rowing in the same direction. So what I tell people is that this is another blip in time. Don't stop what you're doing, right? I think our role as ASLA is to really push forward, to hold strong to our values. If something is really egregious, speak up. If something is kind of wonky, let it be wonky because it may be a distraction, and just keep going. Keep going, doing what we do. Don't change who you are just because of, one group has decided that, oh, we want to try something different. Yeah, it's all right. It shouldn't affect who you are.
I think that's a brilliant answer, and I think we all need to hear that right now. Appreciate your comments, Kona.
Absolutely.
We're gonna wrap this up. I feel like we should go a lot longer, but maybe we'll have to have another installment. So appreciative of your time, Kona. I know our time is up. Christine, thank you so much for such great questions that has prompted a glimpse into Kona's life. So we want to put some details on how to contact you, Kona, and Christine, for anybody wanting to be a part of these discussions. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Angela. I really, really appreciate you and Christine and everything you're all doing. One of the major things we want to do is continue to, express the desire for everyone to become more aware of landscape architecture and the industry of the green industry. So it's all about awareness, and we're going to keep pushing it forward. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kona, for your time.
Absolutely.
It was great speaking with you.
See you again soon.
Great.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
See you next time. Okay. Bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.